Hey again, YouTube. This is Nate, the DIY mechanic, here with Project Frankenstroke. We're working on this project truck that we're essentially putting together from pieces. And today I want to solve this little issue. I went ahead and started loosening this bolt, but I wanted to show you how this comes apart. That's a either 7/16 or 11 millimeter bolt, and you can get in through here. It doesn't line up perfectly, but you can get on it and run this guy loose. And I'll show you what tends to be the issue with these. So we got our bolt loose there. It just pulls up and then unhooks. See how it hooks in there at the back into that hole. There's our bolt. Put it up in the interior parts tray. And that is typically the issue with these doors. These doors are thin. There's not a lot of sheet metal in these things. That's part of the reason that these trucks are light. They're actually lighter than the Super Duty trucks were, the ones that replaced them, and that is part of the reason why. There are no crumple zones in this thing. There are no side protections or anything, and these doors, the skins are very thin. So what tends to happen is, as this cable gets gummed up, or just from 200,000 or 300,000 miles worth of fatigue, this breaks. And you can kind of see on this one, it's all broken up. Save that spring clip, we'll need that later. There I go. Every time I lean in here, I bump that stock and turn the wipers on. So that is typically what happens. The way that these things work, the back kind of acts as a fulcrum. And when you lift on this handle, you're really pulling directly against that single bolt. It puts a lot of pressure in that area. There's not a lot of meat there to begin with. And over time, it just fatigues the metal. It starts to crack, and then you end up with this. So this guy's got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cracks in it, where it's just all broken apart. So there is a replacement that someone makes that goes in here. It is by a company, I think by the name of OBS Solutions. You can find them on the internet. It's a plate basically that's bent to fit right in here. It's got some holes in it. You just drill a couple of holes, put a couple of pop rivets in, and it basically reinforces this entire area. I think that plate runs about 26 bucks or something, plus shipping. Certainly not a bad idea to support the guys that are supporting this little niche market for these trucks. However, on this one, it's a project truck, so I'm being a little bit cost conscious, and I've got a welder, so I'm thinking I can fix that myself. So one of the things that I've done in the past is, if you've got a door sitting around that maybe is off of a parts truck, or the bottom of the door is all rotted out, or it's been wrecked, you can just go in with a cutting wheel on a grinder and cut that whole section out, lay it right in over top of this. Obviously you'd want to tap these areas down where it's bent up, but flatten that out, lay your new piece in there. You can either pop rivet it into place, or you can weld it in, which is what I've done in the past. Right now I don't have any junk doors here. All of the doors that I've got would be, all of the driver doors I've got that are here would be usable. So rather than sacrifice a door for this, I think I'm going to get a hammer and a dolly. We'll try to flatten that out just a little bit. We'll weld it up, and then we'll put just a little bit of reinforcement on the back of that, so that it is a little bit sturdier than it was before, and I'll show you how to do that. So let me switch camera angles here, try to free my hands up, and I'll show you what we're doing. Alright, so we've got that flattened out. I'm using a dolly and a sheet metal hammer. These were part of an inexpensive kit that I got from, I don't know, Amazon or maybe Summit Racing or someplace like that. It was a kit that was, I forget, 3 or 4 different dollies and 3 or 4 different hammers. Just sheet metal tools. Like I said, they weren't very expensive. But if you don't have one of those and you've got a hammer like this, you've got a little ball peen hammer, anything that you can use in there to back this up will work. Piece of heavy steel, another hammer, just about anything that you can put in there that's got some weight to it, a little bit of inertia to work against will help. And what that does is a couple of things. Number one, it gives you a flat surface there to work against to get everything kind of flattened out. The other thing, and it's equally as important, is this thing's got some weight to it. You know, that probably weighs a pound or so by itself. And what that does is it allows the metal to resist movement so that the high spots that you're hitting with the hammer move, and the parts that are against that dolly or whatever weight that you put behind there resist that movement. So it helps to actually flatten the surface out because, you know, it's not just bouncing around. If I didn't have that dolly in there, I could just hit this with a hammer and the whole thing would probably stay kind of curled up and it would just kind of all push back at the same time. So by backing it up with the dolly or with another hammer or really with anything that's got some weight, you kind of help to flatten surfaces out. So I guess the next thing that I'm going to do here, because the rest of this is really in it's pretty decent shape, we're going to go ahead and weld those cracks up. And I'm going to back this up with a fender washer. So all we really need to do is to allow ourselves an edge here, because again, that's where that little spring clip goes through that has the threads on the back side. And then we've got to leave an opening in here for that bolt to go through. So what I'll do is I'll get a fender washer and just cut one side of it off with some tin snips so that it's got a straight edge on one side. We'll hold that guy in place in there with, I don't know, maybe we'll use some channel locks, or I don't know if I can get in there with a vice grip or not. A little C-clamp maybe. I could probably get in here with a C-clamp, hold that into place, and then we'll go ahead and weld it. Now the other thing that we want to do before we start welding is to get this cleaned up. If you are kind of new to welding, welding is somewhat like paint, that a lot of the finished product is in the prep. So on a surface like this where we've got paint and we've probably got some rust and we've got some oxidation happening there, we want to get that cleaned up as best as possible. As much of that paint as we can remove, any of that rust that we can move, we want to get down to bare metal. That'll give us a stronger weld, it'll give us a cleaner weld, and it'll just do a lot better job. So I'll get out here with a grinder, maybe with a flap wheel or something on it. We'll just clean this up a little bit. I'll get a washer, we'll clamp it into place, and then we'll weld it up. So let me get that stuff taken care of, and we'll go from there. All right, so we've got that cleaned up as best we can. It's not perfect, but it'll help a lot. I've got myself a fender washer. Fender washer is just an oversized flat washer. Well, this one happens to be 1/4 inch, and you can see that it's Got some thickness to it. It's actually probably thicker than the rest of this door panel, so it'll be a little more than double what is there. And I just clipped the back edge off of it so that you can see that it allows me to kind of center up that hole and it doesn't protrude too far into my opening there where that clip needs to go through. So we'll try to get a C-clamp in here, clamp that into place to hold it still, at least until we get things tacked up, and then we can weld it. Alright, so I've got my fender washer held in place there with a little C-clamp. That worked out nicely. And I am ready to go ahead and weld that guy up. Got my hood. And how do you like my little bargain basement welder? This is a Chicago Electric 120 volt wire welder. Uses flux core wire. I picked this thing up in a trade here. I've got other welders that would probably be better for this job, but I figured, hey, what the heck? Why not show you what can be done using bargain basement equipment. That is probably about the cheapest welder that you can buy at Harbor Freight, which is really saying something. I think these things cost less than $100 or right around it. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll leave it set to the minimum. It's just got 2 ranges, low and high. Go ahead and turn it on. I'll turn the wire speed down to about there. Try that. Connect up our ground clamp. That should be a good ground. We'll see. And we'll see what we can do. This may not make a pretty weld, but we can always dress it up when we're done here a little bit with the die grinder and a flap wheel. So let's see what we can do here. Well, it ain't pretty. That is one problem with flux core wire, is that it's messy. It's a real spatter maker. But I think we got it. We'll go ahead and clean it up a little bit with that little die grinder and a flap wheel. See what it looks like once we get some of the mess cleaned off. One thing of note, I don't know if there's something wrong with this or if it's the way that they all are, but it seems to me as though the electrode on this thing is always hot. So if you've got a tail sticking out there, you better be ready to strike an arc when you get close to the work. It seems as though the trigger just turns on the wire feed. It doesn't actually have a relay in it that turns off the power to the electrode, which isn't a huge deal. It's definitely one way they could trim some costs. So it works ish, but you're not going to be winning any Instagram accolades for the quality of your welds, particularly on thin sheet metal like this. That low range is actually a little bit too hot. It kept burning through the door skin there, which is okay because I was backing it up with that washer anyway and I wanted to get a good bond. So I think we're good there. We'll go ahead and clean it up and see what it looks like once we get it cleaned off. Well, there we go. It's not beautiful, that's for sure, but it's good enough for what it is. This will be a work truck, not a show truck, and it's buried inside the door. So for working with bargain basement equipment, that'll be good enough. That washer that we put in there, you know, extends clear back into here. So it's going to distribute that force across a much larger area of the door. And I've wiped it down here now with a clean rag and a little bit of mineral spirits just to get all the oil and smoke and junk off of it. I'll go ahead and hit it with just a little bit of paint just to keep it from rusting, and then we'll be ready to put the door back, or put the handle back on. Not the door together just yet, but we can put the handle on anyway. Alright, just a little bit of paint. This is just Rust-Oleum white. Matches pretty good on these work trucks. So, good enough for a work truck. I got it on just a little bit heavy there. I probably would have been better off to do a tack coat and then hit it again. I'm going to have a little sag there, but it's plenty good enough for what it is. So we'll let that tack up a little bit, and we'll put the door panel, or the door latch, back together. Alright, well, we've given that paint some time to dry, and we've gotten things bolted back together, and I have to say that is quite an improvement. That'll make opening the door a lot easier. So we've got that portion of the project taken care of. Again, there is an aftermarket solution that is a piece of plating that goes over top of that whole section, that whole area, and reinforces it. It's not a bad option at all. It's about 25 bucks a side, $26, something like that, plus the shipping. But you can do it without that, especially if you catch it before it gets really bad. This one wasn't terrible, so we were able to get it squared away. So that's all you've really got to do. Now, sometimes you'll also have an issue with this cable. The actual interior cable gets stretched, or this linkage can get worn out and you just get a lot of slop in there. This one is actually in pretty good shape. I don't know if that cable was replaced at some point or what, but I think it'll be just fine. So with that piece out of the way, we can move on to other things. Get that one little item off the list. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching. I will put a link here in the video to the rest of the project here. Doing a lot of work on this old body style Ford. We basically started with a rolling chassis, and we're just about ready to make a trip to the gas station. So we're moving in the right direction. That's Project Frankenstroke. Thanks for watching.